This story is inspired by the real case of Paulette Guevara Farah, 2010, Mexico. She vanished, without a sound, without a trace. A 4-year-old girl disappeared from her own bed, in her own room, in the safety of her family's luxury apartment, and no one heard a thing. Not her mother, not the nanny, not her sister who slept in the same room. 9 days later, the most chilling part, her body was found. Right there, in the same bed, the same room. A place that had already been searched by family, police, dogs, and the media. How is that even possible? This is the story of Paulette Guevara Farah, a case that shattered Mexico, ignited media hysteria, and exposed unsettling cracks in justice, privilege, and truth. Paulette wasn't just any little girl. She was born with physical and neurological disabilities. Her speech was limited. She walked with difficulty. She was vulnerable, and the idea that she could vanish into thin air felt not only unlikely, but impossible. It was March 22, 2010, a calm Monday in the wealthy neighborhood of Interlomas, in Huixquilucan, Mexico. Paulette had just returned from a weekend with her father. That evening, her mother, Lizette Farah, tucked her into bed alongside her sister. The family lived in a high-end apartment with security, nannies, and private services. Everything seemed under control. But by morning, Paulette was gone. The sheets undisturbed. No sign of forced entry. No noise. Nothing. What followed was a whirlwind: police interrogations, televised interviews, and endless speculation. The family launched a full media campaign. Posters, press conferences, public appearances. Lizette cried on national television, begging for her daughter's return. The nanny sobbed. The father remained strangely calm. Everyone had a theory. Was it kidnapping? Was she taken by someone close? Why would someone target a child like Paulette? And here's where it gets bizarre. 9 days later, her body was found wedged between the mattress and the foot of her bed, in the very room she vanished from, a space already combed over by trained dogs and crime scene specialists. The official story? She suffocated accidentally, trapped by her own bed. Case closed. But almost no one believed it. How could a dead body go unnoticed for 9 days? No odor? No trace? Why would trained dogs miss it? And more importantly, why did the authorities change their version of events so many times? The contradictions are disturbing. The nanny said she made the bed every day and noticed nothing. The mother gave inconsistent statements. Surveillance footage was mysteriously lost. Evidence was handled poorly. And then there's the most haunting detail of all: the strange way Paulette's body was posed, as if it had been carefully placed there. Later. What really happened that night? Was it a tragic accident? Or something far darker? What secrets were buried in that luxury apartment? The walls had ears, and in a desperate attempt to unravel the truth, investigators turned to surveillance. Hidden microphones were placed inside the Guevara Farah apartment. The family didn't know. Not the parents, not the nannies. No one. It was a bold move by the Attorney General's Office of the State of Mexico, and what they captured changed the course of the investigation. Just days after Paulette's disappearance, the apartment had become a circus. Journalists gathered outside. Police wandered in and out. Psychologists evaluated family members. The public watched everything unfold in real time, as if it were a scripted soap opera. But inside those walls, behind closed doors, reality was stranger and darker than fiction. The secret recordings revealed tension, accusations, contradictions. Lizette Farah, Paulette's mother, was caught whispering with Mauricio Guevara, the father. In one clip, Lizette scolds Mauricio for saying too much to reporters. In another, she questions the timeline of his version. And then, she says something chilling. They already recorded everything. It's over. What we say now won't change anything. The tone? Cold. Calculated. Not the voice of a grieving mother. And yet, nothing directly incriminating was ever said. No confession. No admission. Just undertones. Just hints. But that was enough to raise alarms, especially when contrasted with her earlier behavior. In public, Lisette wept. She appeared on national TV, pleading for Paulette's safe return. But behind the cameras, in the shadows of those secret tapes, she was sharp, strategic. Her story, like many around her, began to unravel. Take the timeline, for instance. Lisette claimed she put Paulette to bed around 8:30 p.m. But the nannies gave conflicting accounts. One said she didn't even see the mother that night. Another said she heard a strange noise in the hallway around midnight. The building's surveillance system mysteriously malfunctioned during those hours. Meanwhile, investigators asked the obvious. How could a little girl slide into the narrow gap between a mattress and a solid bed base? Without anyone hearing? Without anyone seeing? How did she end up in that exact position, with her body hidden yet visible from the foot of the bed? Pathologists ruled she died of mechanical asphyxiation, suffocated by her own bed. But others weren't so sure. Her body had no signs of struggle, no bruises, no scratches. And the temperature of the corpse didn't match a death from 9 days earlier. Then came the second twist. The moment investigators found the body, no one screamed. Not the family, not the nannies, not even Lisette. It was as if they already knew. And the scene? It wasn't secured. Reporters were allowed into the room. Cameras flashed. Evidence was trampled. The entire discovery felt more like a staged unveiling than a forensic breakthrough. The question everyone was now asking wasn't just how Paulette died, but when and where. Because if she didn't die in that bed the night she vanished, then someone put her there. Later. But who? And why? The night Paulette disappeared, every minute counted. And when investigators reconstructed the timeline, it didn't take long to realize something didn't add up. A single gap, just 1 hour, began to crack the entire story wide open. Lisette Farah said goodnight to Paulette around 8:30 p.m. The girl was already in bed, in her pajamas. Her sister was asleep beside her. The nannies, Erica and Martha, had finished their shift and retreated to their room. Everything seemed quiet. At 9:00 p.m., according to Lisette, she stepped out again to check on Paulette. Nothing unusual. No sound. No movement. The house was still. But the next verifiable movement inside the apartment didn't happen until nearly 10:15 p.m. Over an hour later. That's when one of the nannies reported hearing a strange noise, like a bump or a soft thud, from the hallway. She peeked out, saw nothing, and assumed it was nothing. But what happened during that hour? The surveillance cameras in the building failed to capture anything. A coincidental technical glitch, officials later called it. Footage from the front entrance was also corrupted. Still, one piece of data remained. The building's elevator logs, and they revealed that the elevator was used just once between 9 p.m. and midnight, from the floor where the Gabara Farah apartment was located. No one confessed to using it. What if someone left, or arrived, during that missing hour? This is where the theories take shape. Some believe Paulette never died in that apartment at all, that she died, or was killed, elsewhere, and was hidden until the time was right to discover her body. But if that's true, who had the motive and the means? Let's consider the possibilities. Theory 1. Accidental death. Maybe Paulette fell from the bed, got stuck between the mattress and frame. Could no one hear her? Did she call for help? Remember, she had speech difficulties. It's possible her cries were soft or misinterpreted. But that still doesn't explain how trained rescue dogs failed to detect her scent just inches away from where she'd been sleeping. Theory 2. Neglect. Did someone panic after realizing Paulette was dead? Perhaps due to a medical emergency or suffocation, and then hide the body out of fear of being blamed. Theory 3. Homicide and cover-up. This is where the hour matters most. If Paulette died elsewhere, she had to be placed in the bed after investigators had already searched it. After the room had been swept. That means someone smuggled her body back into the apartment and into the bed without being caught. That would take planning. That would take access. That would take someone close. And yet, no one was ever charged. By now, public outrage had exploded. Media commentators demanded answers. Hashtags trended across Mexico. Protesters gathered outside the Attorney General's office. The message was clear. People didn't believe the official version. Because the real horror wasn't just the death of a child. It was the growing sense that justice itself was being manipulated. And the more you examine the clues, the harder it gets to believe this was a simple accident. If there's one person whose words shaped and shook the entire case, it was Lizette Farah. Paulette's mother was everywhere. TV interviews, police reports, press conferences. And at first, her pain seemed real. Heart-wrenching. She cried on camera, trembling as she begged, "Please, if someone has her, let her come back. She's sick, she needs care." But as days passed and contradictions piled up, those same tears started to feel rehearsed. Because Lizette didn't just make one inconsistent statement. She made several, and each time, it pushed investigators deeper into confusion and suspicion. Take the night Paulette vanished. In her first statement, Lizette said she put both girls to bed around 8:30 p.m. She even claimed she kissed them goodnight. But when questioned again 2 days later, she changed a detail. Now she said she tucked Paulette in alone, while the other daughter was already asleep. Then came the bedtime routine. Lizette initially said Paulette had trouble sleeping alone, which is why the sisters shared a room. But later she insisted the girl had no issues falling asleep by herself. A small change? Maybe. But for a case built on moments and details, every inconsistency matters. And the biggest red flag? She claimed she checked on Paulette around midnight one last time. But the nannies said Lizette was asleep by then and didn't leave her room again. When confronted with this contradiction, Lizette said she might have been dreaming. Dreaming? It got stranger. When the body was found, Lizette's reaction wasn't what anyone expected. No screaming, no breakdown, no collapse to the floor. Instead, she walked quietly into the room, looked at the bed, and said nothing. Cameras caught the moment. Her face was unreadable. Not numb, not shocked, just blank. And in the following days, she stopped speaking to reporters. Her attorney blocked further questioning. The once public campaign for Paulette's return suddenly went dark. But investigators weren't done. They brought in psychological experts to evaluate her. What they found was troubling. Lizette showed signs of narcissistic behavior, extreme control over the household, and an aversion to external authority. She had a history of conflicts, with the school Paulette attended, with therapists, even with family members. One report mentioned she had once threatened to fire a nanny for allowing Paulette to crawl on the floor without supervision. Was she overly protective or dangerously controlling? Dig deeper, and you find something darker. Whispers from former employees suggested that Lizette was overwhelmed with Paulette's condition, that she sometimes referred to her daughter as a burden, that she believed Paulette would never live a normal life. These weren't proven facts, but they cast a long, chilling shadow over the events of that night. Some believe Lizette lost control, that a moment of frustration turned fatal. Others believe she discovered Paulette already lifeless, perhaps from an accident, and chose to hide it rather than face public judgment. But here's the twist. In Mexico, Maternal figures are rarely seen as suspects in high-profile crimes. The public image of the grieving mother is nearly sacred. And that might be exactly why no one wanted to point a finger, at least not officially. Still, behind closed doors, prosecutors had doubts. Enough to warrant continued surveillance. Enough to delay a final ruling. But just when it seemed Lisette would be called to answer more questions, the Attorney General made a decision that stunned the nation. It lasted less than 5 minutes. A press conference so short, so abrupt, that most journalists didn't even have time to prepare their questions. And yet, in those brief moments, everything changed. The Attorney General of the State of Mexico stood before the cameras and declared the case of Paulette Guevara Ferra officially closed. The cause of death? Accidental suffocation. The conclusion? No crime was committed. The country watched in disbelief. 9 days, a missing child, a body discovered in a previously searched room, conflicting testimonies, inconsistencies from the mother, strange behaviors, and suddenly, it was over? The statement was clinical. According to the official version, Paulette had shifted in her sleep, slid down the narrow space at the foot of her bed, and became trapped between the mattress and the wooden frame. She suffocated slowly. Her limited mobility and speech disability meant she couldn't call for help. No one heard her. No one noticed. Case closed. But the backlash was immediate and brutal. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #Justicia para Paulette flooded Twitter. Protesters gathered outside government buildings chanting, "Donde está la verdad?" Where is the truth? Even seasoned journalists broke from protocol, openly accusing the Attorney General of rushing the decision, of silencing the case, of protecting someone. Why? That's the million-dollar question. Some believed the case had become too politically volatile. Paulette's family was wealthy, connected. Her father, Mauricio Guevara, was a respected businessman with ties to influential figures. The building where they lived housed high-profile residents. The media circus had grown dangerous, potentially threatening reputations and careers. Closing the case meant ending the chaos, but others point to something far more sinister: a systemic failure rooted in corruption, power, and image management. Mexico, at the time, was under intense international scrutiny over its criminal justice system. A child's mysterious death, especially one involving privilege, disabilities, and possible cover-ups, was bad optics. A closed case, labeled accidental, was neat, clean, forgettable. Except it wasn't. Because investigators still had doubts. In fact, several high-ranking officials resigned within weeks of the case closure, some anonymously leaking internal documents that contradicted the official story. Forensic reports showed inconsistencies in body temperature and lividity. Crime scene photos revealed that Paulette's body was tightly compressed into a space too narrow for natural movement. Even the no odor argument raised eyebrows. A body in decomposition after 9 days should have been unmistakable. And then, the tapes. Remember those secret recordings? Somehow, days after the case was closed, audio clips of Lisette and Mauricio leaked to the press. The tone? Detached, cold. Lisette was heard saying, "They won't find anything. It's done." Mauricio responded, "We just have to keep the story straight." The public was horrified, but the government refused to reopen the case. Instead, they doubled down on the narrative. Officials stated they had full confidence in the original investigation. Reporters who pressed too hard were blacklisted. Forensic experts who disagreed were ignored. And when one journalist tried to publish a book about the inconsistencies, it was pulled from shelves within days. Paulette's funeral was small, private, surrounded by cameras, but closed to the public. Her tiny white casket was lowered into the ground beneath a gray sky, while her story remained clouded in silence. And still the central question lingered. If she truly died by accident, why so many lies? Why the shifting timelines, the broken surveillance, the contradictions, the leaks? Follow the money, and you'll often find the truth. That's what one investigative journalist whispered off camera, just weeks after Paulette's case was declared closed. At the time, his words seemed cynical, but then the documents began to surface: contracts, transfers, favors. And what once felt like a tragic mystery began to look more and more like a strategic operation to protect reputations, careers, and something far more delicate. Behind the smiling faces of officials at press conferences, behind the polished statements of accidental death, something darker was unfolding. Internal memos leaked from the State of Mexico's Attorney General's office revealed that several individuals close to the case had financial ties to Paulette's father, Mauricio Guevara. Donations, real estate arrangements, consulting agreements, with no clear service provided. Money was moving. Quietly, untraceably. Even the forensic lab that conducted the autopsy had a recent influx of private funding. Days after releasing the final cause of death as accidental mechanical asphyxiation, one of the lab's directors was promoted to a senior position within the Ministry of Health. Coincidence? Maybe. But the pattern kept repeating. A web of silent handshakes and quiet trades. And then came the call. It was never meant to be heard. A wiretap, mistakenly kept recording long after the investigation was archived. On the tape, two government officials, one from the Attorney General's office and one from the Department of Public Security, discussed the case in hushed tones. Did you destroy the other file? It's gone, but the media's too close. What about the mother? She's clean. Nothing that links her directly. And then, the chilling line. If the public finds out what really happened, we're finished. That one phrase sent shivers through anyone who heard it. Because it confirmed what millions already suspected. There was a truth being hidden. Not just overlooked. Not just misunderstood. Hidden. Deliberately. But what was it? Some believed the case threatened to expose more than a family tragedy. That it would reveal how deeply favoritism, influence, and image management infect the justice system. That high-profile figures, untouchable in the public eye, used their power to control the outcome of an active investigation. Others believe it was even darker. That Paulette's death wasn't just inconvenient. It was dangerous. That reopening the case would lead to questions about her home environment, her medical care, her psychological treatment. And those questions would lead to people in high places, people who couldn't afford scrutiny. Journalists who tried to investigate further were silenced. One had her phone tapped. Another's office was mysteriously raided for tax violations. A third, who conducted a months-long investigation into the financial records of the Guevara family, vanished from the media entirely. Her last published piece ended with the line, "What's hidden under Paulette's bed is bigger than we think." So what was hidden? There's a theory that's grown in strength over the years, once considered fringe, now accepted by many. It suggests Paulette's death wasn't the start of the story, but the end of a long pattern of dysfunction, silence, and fear inside that apartment. Some insiders claimed that Paulette's condition, her needs, her therapies, were becoming too much for the family to manage, that there were arguments, financial strain, even discussions of long-term care solutions that terrified the mother. And then, one night, everything escalated. An accident, or a decision, covered up in panic, masked in silence, protected by power. But if that's true, if Paulette didn't die alone by accident in her own bed, then someone out there knows what really happened. Someone kept the secret. Someone allowed her to be buried with a lie. When the cameras stopped rolling and the headlines began to fade, the world moved on. But what happened to Paulette's parents after the storm? Where did Lisette Farah and Mauricio Guevara go? Once they were no longer the faces of a national tragedy. They didn't go to court. They didn't stand trial. They didn't face formal charges. Instead, they disappeared, first from the news, then from public life. But behind closed doors, their lives were anything but normal. Lizette Farah, once a media figure crying on national television, became a recluse. She stopped attending public events. She was spotted only occasionally, wearing sunglasses, moving with bodyguards, avoiding questions. For years, she refused all interview requests. When finally confronted by a journalist in a parking lot years later, she gave only 2 words: no comment. Friends close to her described a woman haunted, but not by guilt, by control. She'd cut ties with many family members, changed numbers, moved addresses multiple times. And strangely, she never visited Paulette's grave. Not publicly, not once. Even more disturbing, she sued multiple media outlets for defamation over how they portrayed her during the case. In court, her lawyers insisted she was a victim of public hysteria, of institutional failure, of the media's obsession. She won 2 of those lawsuits. The third was settled quietly with a confidentiality clause. As for Mauricio Guevara, he returned to business. Gradually, cautiously. He sold one of his companies shortly after Paulette's death, then relocated to another state. Rumors swirled that he remarried, that he tried to start over. But he too refused interviews. His public silence wasn't grief, it was strategy. Because any misstep, any wrong phrase, could reignite the case. And yet, something unexpected happened in 2016. A leaked audio surfaced, an unedited version of the secret recordings from 2010. In it, Mauricio can be heard saying, in a moment of frustration, "If Lizette hadn't panicked, we wouldn't be in this mess." The sentence ignited a wave of speculation. Was that a slip? Was he talking about the discovery of the body? Or something much earlier? Activists petitioned to reopen the case. Again. But the government declined. Again. No new evidence has emerged, they claimed. The file remains closed. Still, something had changed. The case became a symbol in Mexico, a representation of impunity, of how wealth and connections could rewrite truth. Paulette's name was whispered in university lectures, in legal circles, in protests. Her photo became a tragic icon, the little girl who vanished in plain sight, and who was found right where she'd always been. And yet, justice never came. Neither Lizette nor Mauricio were ever declared legally responsible for Paulette's death or disappearance. No charges, no trial, nothing. In fact, a court ruling formally declared them not guilty of any wrongdoing, clearing their records entirely. But the court of public opinion? That was another story. To this day, most Mexicans don't believe the official version. Polls show that over 70% of the population suspects Paulette was the victim of a cover-up. That she didn't die alone. That someone close, knows what really happened that night. In the years that followed, Lizette tried to reclaim control. She attempted to launch a parenting blog. Yes, a blog about motherhood. It was taken down within hours due to backlash. Death threats. Thousands of comments flooded the page. Where was your parenting when Paulette needed you? Meanwhile, Paulette's room was emptied, her toys donated, her bed destroyed, as if erasing the space would erase the memory. But it didn't. 10 years after Paulette Guevara Farah's death, silence had returned to the luxury apartment in Interlomas. The world had turned the page. The cameras were gone. The outrage faded into memory. But the building itself? It remembered. Walls don't forget. Neither do floorboards. In 2020, the apartment where Paulette lived and where she was found was finally resold. The new tenant was a young professional, unaware of the full weight of the home's past. At first, everything seemed normal, clean, sterile. But during a small renovation, something unexpected happened. A floor panel, beneath where Paulette's bed once stood, gave way. Inside, wedged between layers of insulation, was a small pink sock. It matched the pajamas Paulette was wearing the night she disappeared. Authorities were called. Forensics returned. The media, once silent, surged with whispers of a possible reopening. But again, the answer was the same. No evidence of criminal activity. Case remains closed. Still, questions returned. How could that sock have ended up under the floor? Was it proof she had been moved? Evidence the scene had been staged? Or just a forgotten artifact from a chaotic search? No one knows, and maybe no one ever will. But for millions, that sock became a symbol, a silent scream, proof that even after a decade, the truth still lingered just beneath the surface, hidden but not gone. Paulette's case wasn't just a tragedy. It was a mirror, reflecting a society where wealth can bury consequences, where narratives are curated, where justice is optional. Today, Paulette would be 19 years old. Would she have grown stronger, learned to walk more steadily, found her voice? We'll never know. What we do know is this: her death changed Mexico. It became a cultural scar, a reference point, a whispered warning in courtrooms, classrooms, and living rooms. In 2023, a documentary was released, briefly. It included unreleased audio, new witness testimonies, and expert analysis. But within days, it was pulled from every major platform. Licensing issues, they claimed. But those who saw it say otherwise. One final piece stood out, a retired officer stating, with eyes heavy and voice shaking, "We knew from day one, but we couldn't fight what was above us. And that's the real horror, not just the death of a child, but the machinery that moved to protect the powerful, to erase the truth, to manipulate public memory." Paulette became collateral damage in a system built to preserve reputation over reality. Today, her grave is quiet. No flowers, no visits. Just a small white stone, worn by weather and time. But sometimes, locals say, you can see someone parked nearby. A woman in sunglasses, engine running. She never steps out, just watches, then drives away. Whether it's guilt, grief, or fear, no one knows. Because Paulette Guevara Farah didn't just vanish once. She vanished twice, first from her bed, and then from the justice that was supposed to protect her.